Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I am Frank Capello.
And I'm Rivka Rivera. Hey, Frank. What's up?
Not much, Rivka. You're recording live from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania right now, where we went to college together. So what are you doing in Pittsburgh? Just got nostalgic? Wanted to go hang out for a little bit?
I just felt like, let me get myself in the Garden Inn and just hang out on Forbes Avenue. I'm here. It's really awesome. There was a grant opportunity that I applied for to work on a play that I've been writing. And I'm here with a director, a set designer, producer, a sound designer. And yeah, it's actually really, in the context of anti-capitalism, what's great about it is that there is no actual, like, you have to have this accomplished in order to fulfill the needs of said grant. It's literally, hey, here's the resources to explore design elements of which is you rarely in creating a play have the opportunity to explore. There's a lot for exploring the text and, as you're writing and work with actors, but not design. So, because you really need means of production for that, which Carnegie Mellon has beautiful space for that. So it's a pretty amazing, it's first year of it that they're doing it. And it's a pretty amazing initiative that they have. And I feel really, really grateful and lucky that, they said yes to our project. And so we're here doing that, exploring, and it's like wild abundance. And it is sometimes really hard to be like, wow, you just get the time and space to be creative and explore, which is so rare.
And I will say very well deserved. I have seen several readings of your play. It's a beautiful, beautiful play, and it's extremely moving and relevant and personal. And so I'm not surprised that they said yes. Yeah. And I'm excited that you're getting the opportunity to develop it more. It's very, very well deserved.
Cool. And I get to be here where I haven't been here since I graduated a long time ago. And it is one of those weird things. I don't know if this happens to anyone listening, but when you're in a space that you haven't been for a long time, but have so many memories in, everything feels smaller than I remember. Just everything felt so such greater distance between places and bigger and I don't know if that's because I was younger. It wasn't smaller in stature, but I was just everything feels oh, this is much smaller and closer. Or then you'll also end up in a place and be like, I have not thought of this hallway. And now all these memories are flooding back, or I haven't thought of this store. And it's it's still here. There's a lot that's missing that has closed, but there's a lot that's still here. So that's a nice thing. I feel like going back to New York, there will be things missing from my block just leaving for 2 weeks. So,
and we should say Pittsburgh, absolutely wonderful city. I loved being in Pittsburgh for college. And if you've never visited Pittsburgh, definitely the superior of the Pennsylvania cities, in my opinion. Sorry, Philly. So we are today doing something a little bit different than we normally do. Instead of talking about a movie, we are going to be talking about the series finale of Succession. Yeah, this is something that we had talked about for a little bit. Succession is a very important show to us. It is very cinematic in a lot of ways. And also we want to be able to, break the format here and there. And, it doesn't always have to be movies. I guess this is technically TV versus capitalism. But the last thing we wanted to mention up top, a little bit of housekeeping, is that we're going to be taking the next 2 weeks off of releasing this podcast. So after this Succession episode comes out, 2 weeks, no episodes, and then we'll be back. As we mentioned, Rivka is working on her play in Pittsburgh. I am actually about to leave the country next week for a little trip with my partner. So we just, rather than kill ourselves to, crank out some episodes while we're gone, we were just like, let's just take a break.
Give everyone a chance to catch up on those episodes you missed out.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny. We did a meeting with some of the Lever subscribers, and someone actually gave us the note of Movies versus Capitalism needs to put out less episodes because I can't watch the movies that fast, which I thought was a very sweet sentiment. And also I was like, yes, I feel seen. We are watching a lot of movies.
Yeah, it's a lot of movies to watch. You don't have to like listen as we go, but I appreciate that. Thank you, caller, subscriber.
Now's your chance to catch up. So we'll be back in a few weeks after this one.
So we're going to get to our conversation on Succession. But before we do, we just want to let you know that this podcast is produced by the two of us.
Yes, we perform all of the necessary labor to make this show happen.
And as we are trying to practice our anti-capitalist values, we don't sell ads on this show. Instead, we rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you're able to support us, please consider subscribing to our Patreon.
For just $5 a month, you get access to our entire back catalog of premium episodes, and you will be directly supporting this show. You could also leave us a one-time contribution in our tip jar, and you can find all of those links in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com.
You can also help us out for free by leaving a rating and review for this show on your podcast app. It takes 2 seconds, and it's super helpful in boosting the algorithm and getting this show in front of more people, and we really appreciate it. We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back with our conversation about Succession.
All right, we are very excited today to be joined by Mr. David Sirota, founder of The Lever, a reader-supported investigative news outlet which produces this podcast. David, welcome to, I guess this is TV versus capitalism today.
That's right. That's right. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'd like to think that The Lever is one small example of not being Waystar Royco.
Yes, I can attest from being internal at The Lever that we do not have any of the corporate dynamics of Waystar Royco.
Wait, Frank, you're not David's son?
No, I'm not. He's not grooming me for a leadership position and then
How disappointing.
Dangling it away from me every few months is just like, I don't know if you've got the chops for the top job. Well, David, we wanted to have you on because, you and I have talked about Succession for the last year. Rivka and I talk about it, and we just really, it feels momentous that this show has now ended because it was a very big part of all of our lives for the last several years. And it really feels sort of like the last of the prestige shows of like the 2000s era, we're going back now, but the Mad Men's, the Game of Thrones, the Breaking Bads. It feels like Succession ending is us sort of saying goodbye to that era of TV. So I'm just
I was
curious
already depressed about it, Frank, but that's when you put it like that.
Well, what has this show meant to both of you? Rivka, you could start.
What has this meant to me? Well, I think you just nailed it, that it was so good. It just was so consistently good through a lot of not great stuff that you could just count on this to be great TV, great storytelling. I'm sad. I'm sad that it's over. I'm glad we're getting into the discussion of this episode because I thought it was just like great all the way through, and I'm looking forward to starting from the top because I'm like, well, guess I'll just have to start over. I think the big thing I love the most about Succession was just like how incredible the character development for all of these characters were, while never losing the big picture message that like life under capitalism, when you are this family, it's not what they paint the picture to be. Like there's never a moment that you watched in this entire series for me where I was like, that looks sexy, I want to be there. Like they actually destroy the fantasy of like even the yacht when they do that, and like, I think that was the last season. And then in this episode, when they're in the tropics, you're like, God, they really can make that look not a place I want to go. Where like most of television, even when I think they're critiquing like rich and powerful, you're like, I get it that they're evil, but like that looks so fun. Like they all look so great. Like no one's ever wearing anything in this that I'm like, I wish I owned that outfit even. Or like, I wish I was at vacationing there. It's perfect that they find a way that you're all the way through to the end when you're like, I would never want to be anyone here. They're so unhappy. It seems like an absolute nightmare. And I think that's part of the brilliance.
David, how about you? What has this series meant to you, and how do you feel now that it has ended?
So a little bit of a personal story. This series started with, for me, on election night 2016, when I spent election night with some of the cast.
That's right.
When they
Wow.
were table reading the show, they had a election night party at Adam McKay's place that he was staying at in New York. And it obviously hadn't been on the air. I didn't know much about the show. And so watching the episode with the presidential election night was like so kind of surreal, because those are the people that I spent that night with. And of course, that episode, I think, brought back a lot of memories of the Trump 2016 night. I think a lot about this show, about what is not in this show, and about how that I think accurately represents a kind of deep critique of what you're watching. So have you noticed that there are no working class people in this show at all? Like they basically don't exist. The closest thing you get to a working class person is like Logan's guard. That guy, I guess, is like sort of presumably semi-working classish, or at least in like a working classish job, like security guard, sort of semi-cop guy. But there really are, like, the public is not anywhere to be found. The general public is not anywhere to be found in this series at all. And I actually think that the meta message of that is that these oligarchs really do operate inside of a hermetically sealed bubble, in which they don't feel accountable to, they don't feel in touch with, they don't feel any relationship with the mass public that, of course, their entire business is predicated on manipulating and making money off of. So I do think that's not a critique of the writers for not writing that in. It's actually a kudos to the writers for, in my view, accurately representing this hermetically sealed world, which I think then explains so much of the plot, so many of the different storylines, that we as an audience can kind of laugh at, scoff at, take meaning from, because we're getting a glimpse into that world. And I think that's really the magic of this show, is that there is this really deep and biting critique of that world by accurately representing what it is, who's allowed in it, and who isn't.
That's such a good point, because every single aspect of the show feels intentional. Like how you said, it doesn't feel like a forgotten omission from the writers. It's completely intentional that there are no working class characters in this show. And it's jarring how in, like the penultimate episode, when Roman goes into a crowd of protesters, it feels like a real deviation from what we've been watching for 4 years. You're like, I literally have never seen one of these characters like enter a throng of regular people.
And by the way, as I half jokingly tweeted on social media, the real hero of Succession is the one guy who elbowed Roman in the face for like 1 second. Like, did you notice, like, the first time there's like a real working class regular person in an environment not controlled by the Roys, aka not a like a servant or something, like the first second that Roman or a Roy is in that environment, bam, gets like not slapped across the face. And I frankly think that's like an Easter egg. I think they put that in there to
Absolutely.
and I think a lot of people probably watch that and were like, yeah, I'm not mad at that guy for throwing an elbow in Roman's face. Roman's a kind of a dirtbag piece of shit, and like finally at least somebody sort of did that.
Well, it's so brilliant, because nothing that they put in there is like superfluous, like you're saying, or doesn't it? That totally is what breaks Roman open into sort of recognizing like we're all bullshit. And from that moment forward, it's almost like the inevitable truth is they have nowhere to go but sort of like fizzle out once Roman sort of recognizes the bullshit of their reality. Like that hit penetrates into this bubble, and he's literally has this bleeding scar on his face, and he knows that like that wound closing, there's almost that amazing moment where he's upset that it's closing so well, and then that really incredible moment where his brother presses the wound back open. But I mean, the fact that it's connected to that touching with the real world, with the people, with the working classes, like once that happens, we're off to the races, and it can't go anywhere but their demise, really.
And by the way, that breakdown where he said we're all bullshit, I was watching it, and I at first, and I asked my wife this. I was like, is he saying like we the kids are bullshit? Because I actually thought he was saying something bigger. I thought he was saying like this entire business endeavor is bullshit. Like all of this is bullshit. Like
that's what I took.
What our entire company does is bullshit. And which, by the way, is an echo of what he said on election night, where he said none of this really matters. Like it doesn't really matter. Like nothing really matters. And I kind of think like he had kind of a breakdown or a realization of real life. Now, I think what was a little bit, maybe not weird about it, but like the dad was a piece of shit to all of them, right? Like this expression of love for him, it didn't feel inauthentic, because I think you can have love for a father who's a piece of shit and like fucks you up. Like, I think that's like a thing. It doesn't mean like, if a parent is a bad parent, it doesn't necessarily mean the kids don't love them. In fact, I think the way Logan treated these kids was obviously an incredibly abusive relationship. But I think the death sort of brought out in Roman a realization that the entire thing that they're aspiring for and focused on, and the entire series is about, AKA the succession, the business, that he has this realization that it's all a bunch of nonsense. It's all horseshit.
Well, they were left with nothing after Logan died. I don't mean nothing like in a material sense. They were left with billions and billions of dollars. I mean that once Logan was out of the picture, there was no one and nothing to hang their hat on. They purely had to operate as much as you can for being, the scions of a media dynasty. They had to operate on their own with their own. They had to make their own way. So I think each of them, the tail end of this final season was each of them discovering how inept and unqualified they are to operate in this world. And I mean, I think what Logan says to them at the karaoke bar, the last time they see him alive, when he says, "You're not serious people." I mean, we've known that since, if anyone who's been watching the show closely, we've known that about these characters. But the final half of this season was really demonstrating how unserious they are.
Yeah, although I do have to take issue with Roman or Logan in this way. I don't think, for instance, Kendall or Shiv are any less serious than he is, or any less serious than Tom is, right? I mean, maybe you could argue, look, Logan built it from the ground up, fine. So he, that's real experience building something from the ground up. But like, Tom is more serious than Kendall. Like, I don't buy that. Like, Tom is like a corporate lackey. In fact, Tom reassures the Swedish guy. He reassures him, yeah, I'm a complete corporate, like, nothing. I'm like an automaton. I'm a robot, right? Like, I don't think that these characters are like any more bullshit than Greg, or any more bullshit than anybody else in the entire Waystar Royco world that we've bumped into, right? I do get that there's something problematic with giant corporations being run like monarchies, with a dynastic monarchy controlling, billions and billions of dollars. But I also think like everyone in this show is bullshit. Like, who's not a bullshit person? In these the CIO, I mean, he's a complete joke, right? I mean, like Frank, I guess, is kind of an adult voice, sort of. Jerry, I guess, is like an adult lawyer-ish voice, but she's no less of a corporate automaton than Tom, right? And I think that's actually there again, to go to meta messages. I think that's what this is saying. Like, everybody in these worlds are first and foremost transactional. They are about following money, following power, no matter where money and power lead. That their politics, if they have any, are simply a coincidence for the transaction. And I think that is an honest, view of this, but I also think that's what makes this show deeply like if you really think about it, it's like really, really, really dark. I mean, that is a really, really dark view of humanity. And I think like the end of the show, the reason I was depressed, I wasn't depressed because like Kendall's out in a park, looking out at the water, or like, Shiv is, rolling home with her CEO husband, who's actually just a complete tool, and she's got $900 million in the bank. I'm not feeling bad for them. I'm sort of like looking at it like, wow, this view of humanity is incredibly honest, incredibly real, and incredibly, incredibly without anything redeeming at all.
Absolutely. I wanted to hit the point because you brought it up about Tom's moment, which I thought was brilliant, where he's asked to sing for his supper and basically say, like, what do you bring to the table? What's your value, with the dinner scene with Lucas? And,
Right.
I just think he's so good. He's been so good, but he really owns it this season, where he's just, he says, I'm cutting heads and harvesting eyeballs. He's just cold, callous capitalism because he's not part of this, the siblings, and there's none of the family bullshit. We really see, like you were saying, this truth through his eyes, and he performs it so like just.
Although don't you think like he would say anything in that moment that he thought would impress, and that's his thing.
Absolutely.
I think that's his thing for sure, but I think it's true.
Like if he thought saying, I'm actually investing, I'm doing better journalism, if he thought that would impress Lucas, he would have said that. Like nothing that comes from him seems authentic at all, which actually makes me question, even in his fights with Shiv, like when he's not sort of performing, is anything authentic? Like, is literally anything that comes out of this guy's mouth authentic? Like, does he, like, who is the?
Well, I think the actions that we've seen him take are authentic.
If you want to ask me which character on this show could end up being a serial killer, it would be like Tom. Like Tom, like definite potential to be a serial killer.
Yeah, but I think, yes, he says anything that he wants, but like his actions in that moment, I was like, this is us seeing this cold hard, because if this episode has a theme of like Roman, like the bullshit being revealed, there was something so like, I felt that this was maybe like, yes, he's a character who will say anything, but there was something dramaturgically like accurate about like, this is him just being like, this is the fucking truth, because there is a moment of like, I will. And when he says this line, particularly about the media and being in the role that he's in, like, I don't think it's my place to offer dietary advice. If they want red meat and boiling tar, bon appetito. I mean, I loved it, but I think it was just to see him then sit across, and then even more important, then he goes into, okay, that's who you are business wise. Who are you really? And I think I took it as totally fucking honest and depressing as fuck, because he says, I'm a grinder. I worry about everything. And then he goes into this sort of monologue about how deeply he worries. And I think if anything, that was totally fucking honest on who we've known Tom to be, that at the core, this man does not sleep. And it goes back to just like any kind of humanity these people maybe came in with, like this company being in this world has completely destroyed. Like there's not a moment that they're happy or at peace. And that was like, that gave me shivers.
I mean, that dude is the least sympathetic character in the whole show. I mean, I really hate
Tom?
him. Yeah, he's the least. Oh my God. He's like absolutely the least sympathetic character.
Really?
Oh my God. 100%.
I love Tom so much more than
I
any
love
of the
Tom.
Roy kids. Any of the Roy kids. I have so much love in my heart for Tom. You're right. He's a cold, calculating motherfucker. And Rivka, and to both of your points about whether or not he's being honest to Mattson in that moment. I mean, he says something, like what he says is something that any like CEO or head of a company wants to hear, which is like, I'm good at cutting costs and increasing revenue. Like that is going to be true. Like no matter what Lucas wanted to hear, he wanted to hear that. And like cutting heads, harvesting eyeballs, like at his heart, Tom is like, I am a money guy. I will make sure that the fucking money is coming in on time and that our margins are
Like,
getting higher.
Tom,
And that
just
our
to be
growth
clear,
is.
we're on a show called Movies versus Capitalism, and you're actually arguing that Tom is among the more sympathetic characters when Tom is literally the human personification of capitalism. I mean, he's like capitalism in human form. Like that's what he is.
Yes, yes, you're
He
right.
is.
And I'm trying to figure out how to square this contradiction in my head right now. I just find Tom to be like on an emotional level, somewhat more honest, somewhat more in touch with himself in what he wants. I found that his love for Shiv has been very genuine. I feel like he really does love this person and has been
interesting.
and we've watched him be hurt over and over and over again by her throughout the course of this series. And he's also the only person in the main circle that is not a Roy, that is not from the family. So there like, we know that he's from the Midwest. And look, I'm not trying to reinforce the self-made man like myth. I don't believe in that. I think it's bullshit. But I don't know. There's something about this dude, this dude who came from the Midwest who like found himself in this world that I don't know. Maybe it's like I just gravitate towards the outsider or the underdog, and also I think Matthew McFadden is like so funny and so endearing, and like I think
he's a great actor.
I think his
he's a great
performance
actor.
is like unbelievable. So it's a swirl of things. I
He
think that's why
brings
this
so
show
much
is so complicated.
charm.
Because the other thing, David, is that every single one of these characters is, if you met them, you'd be like, that's the worst person I've ever met in my life. Every single one of them. And like each one of them is worse than the other. So it's like, but that's why this show is so amazing, because they've somehow found a way to make them sympathetic.
I just have to say, Frank, because this is what messed me up a little bit and I thought was great, like a great... This, I was like, oh, I thought he loved... I was convinced by the end of this last episode that I'm like, he's hated her the whole time. He fucking hates her. He hates her. He's never loved Shiv.
Okay.
That was what I got at the end. And that fucked me up, because I actually was like, I thought he did. And then I was like, these two hate each other. He has like such a deep... Yeah, like
What
I've
left you
always
with
been
that?
teamed... Well, I think being able to sit across from Matsson. I mean, the many things he's done, like I guess when he betrayed her with her father, like the end of last season. But then, when he sitting across from Matsson, just saying the most like the way they hit that misogyny and the things he was saying about, better to have the man who put the baby in her than the baby lady, and him just being able to sit across and say like, yes, I'll take the crown. I don't think, I think the message I got was like, he might think he loves her, but like there is no love in this world. Again, they do it so well that you're like, there's no love in this extreme world of cap for these people.
Right, but Tom, let's just stay on Tom for a second, because Tom is either a stand-in for capitalism or he is a stand-in for how kind of the regular workaday, ordinary American striver can be sucked into this world of worshiping and doing literally anything in service of oligarchy. Right? I mean, that is that is Tom's story.
100%.
Like now maybe that's a story that's a sad story because that's the way the system is set up. And if you want to succeed, then those are the choices you have to make. But like, I kind of reject that as a life choice. Like, I think we live in a country and a society that says that Tom's path is a fine path where you can get social stature, not only riches, but social stature. You can, you're a pillar of the, if not the community, you're seen as like a legit person. That path is like a venerated path in our society. And to see it, to watch it in this show, I find it like grotesque. Like, I hate this guy. It's one thing to be born to Logan, who's like an awful person. You can't choose who you're born to, right? And then Logan messes you up, like just makes you a complete monstrous, freakish, you don't know what you want. You're like chasing fatherly, love from the dad that he won't give to you. Like, that's actually not Shiv, Roman, and Kendall's choice. Like, that happened to them. Right. And like, Tom is the guy who like makes the choice to want to be in this world and do whatever he can to advance all the way to the top of this world, showing absolutely no morals at all. Like there's never one moment where he's like, I have to make a moral choice that's about something greater than myself. And like, I get that happens all the time in our society, but it's gross. Like it's disgusting. Like I can't, it's hard to watch.
Look, I totally agree with everything you're saying about like Tom, his choices, and him as a character. Again, like I think every single one of these people are some of the worst people on planet Earth. I guess I'm just like, from a narrative, dramatic perspective, I am more compelled by Tom as a character than the three fail children. Does that make sense? Just like I'm more personally compelled by watching someone who has really no stake in this, and rather than these people who had everything handed to them and are fucking it up despite having everything handed to them.
I mean, I found Kendall to be a somewhat sympathetic character in that he doesn't, he struggles. He's mindful of his struggle, that he doesn't know exactly what he wants. He knows he's sort of all over the place. You know, Roman does the pre-grieving and pretends he knows what he's about, and then he cracks because he's like, clearly it's like all bolted up inside and he can't express it. And Shiv, I think, I mean, I don't have no sympathy for her, but like she's done so many awful things and behaved in such awful ways that like it's really hard to like her a lot. But Kendall, I feel like, you know, I actually said this to my wife. I was like, I think Kendall's the only one who ever actually, in a real way, tried to lead a fight against his father. Right? I mean, like Shiv joined in season, what was it, when Tom betrayed her? Was it season 3 or season 4?
Mm-hmm.
The end of season 3. Right. But Kendall went at his dad, did that press conference, did the whole, you know, the like he went at his father. And like, I find that, I don't know if I call it sympathetic, but like, hey, like at least he saw that his father was a monster and was like, you know what? I like, fuck this guy. Like I'm going to go up against him. Now, I mean, he got, you know, you come for the king, you best not miss. And he missed. And like, that sucks for him. But like, I can admire that like a little bit, right? Like he went after the really, really bad guy, you know, okay, you get a couple points for that.
Yeah, I find him the least sympathetic, but that's just like just like the character level. I just could not get down with Kendall Roy. And I think it's really interesting because I'm wondering, like the whole episode, I'm like, are they going to ever address that this man murdered someone? And I was really grateful they did, and the way it came out was so good. And they're just in that final.
Although, wait, let's refresh my memory. He didn't actually. Let's be precise. He didn't murder the guy.
This is a journalistic.
Like he didn't murder the guy. He like Chappaquiddick the guy, right? Like it was like they drove up. He didn't rescue the guy. He was present
for the death.
Yeah,
and then it was like covered up.
Die.
Yeah, although I don't think he like let him die either. Like if he
did try to dive. I mean,
like if you go off a bridge into water and somebody like gets trapped in the car and dies, like I mean that's not great. But like it's not if you can't get him out. Like I can't believe I'm defending Kendall Roy. And by the way, I don't want to hang out with Kendall Roy. Like I'm not interested in hanging out with Kendall Roy. I don't think Kendall Roy is like a hero.
Kendall's definitely the worst hang of everybody. Like
he's the
totally. He's the
He'd
least
be so
fun,
annoying. Sure. Absolutely. I don't want to hang out with that guy. No.
So for the record, David is not defending Kendall Roy.
No, but the only time Kendall was like, maybe not the only time, like the worst moment for me for Kendall was when he walked into that startup and mowed everybody down. Remember that? Was that season 2? Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, that was really some brutal shit right there. That
Which one was that?
Like,
yeah, Logan sends him in to basically shutter Vaulter, the Gawker analog that they bought, but he like does it in a really ruthless way where he has like them do extra work and like give them a bunch of ideas, and then he like stops them from unionizing. It's really like ruthless. And at the end, Rob Yang is like, "Why did you do this?" And he's like, "Because my dad told me to."
Right, and he spit at it. And he spit in his face. Right, it was. Yeah, I mean, like Kendall's not a good guy. Like I'm not. I just think like you know, like I guess I could sympathize a little bit with the fact that he was so clearly like struggling all the time. Like Roman tried to put up and Shiv tried to put up this wall, like I'm chill, like I got it, like I'm all, and like Kendall's the only one who's like, dude, you definitely don't got it. Like you're definitely like messed up, and like you do not have your shit together. And at least I can like sort of sympathize with that because a lot of times I don't feel like I got my own shit together, right? It humanized it. It made it more human, is I guess
I
what
think
I'm saying.
for all of them, the thing that the writing does really well is like never lets you forget that these are stunted children, that this is
Yes.
at the end of the day.
Yes.
And in this last episode where they have the meal fit for a king, you know, the way they're psychologically going to get past that they're going to anoint Kendall is they're going to do this, which I used to do this as a kid. I loved this scene. They're going to make him a meal fit for a king where they take everything from the fridge, throw it in a blender, and they're having so much fun doing it, which is, again, just like, this is so how they relate to this very, very like world-changing business they are in, is like kids, you know? Okay, the rules have changed. Okay, you won this game, but like, who's going to win the next game? And it ultimately comes down to that.
Kendall basically, you know, if you follow it out, he basically throws the presidential election to a fascist because he's annoyed that his sister lied to him, right? I mean, this is how these people operate. It is very childish. Can we get into the decision and from Shiv to Shiv?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
Kendall?
Yes.
Because-
you're talking about the end and the board.
The very end. Yeah. Yeah. Shiv's decision to Shiv. Here's the part I don't really understand, which is that Shiv does seem to hate Tom. I don't think there's a lot of love from Shiv to Tom. So Shiv knows that she's going to help Tom. I don't really fully understand her like hatred of Kendall. Like I get that like Kendall's annoying, but like I don't get that. And she like, so one interpretation I saw was like, this was her way to get the company just out of their lives. Like, but I don't buy, that doesn't track with who she, like, I just want to get this out of our family. It's better for us. Like, no, like that. I don't think that. So like, why did she do that? Like, I don't fully get it.
I thought it really tracked in terms of her, the way they were talking about her role as a woman amongst all these men, and the sense that she talked about the trajectory of they took the crown from her. Like, clearly if her brothers were in power, like they just did not give a fuck. We saw that. So that's why she felt she had to go with Matsson. Matsson demoralizes her. You know, they're like, you're the baby lady now. I think she just kind of was like, where can I still be in the most proximity to power? And ultimately that's going to be next to Tom, you know, and maybe we can make this they even referenced Lady Macbeth. She's like, maybe we can make this weird Macbeth thing work. I think it's depressing, but that was the logic that I tracked. I think last minute
But like
she was
right
just
after Matsson threw her overboard. I'm saying like Matsson had just betrayed her.
But so did her brothers. Her brothers just betrayed her previously. I think she's just been like, where do I maybe get some crumbs?
I thought it was a brilliant line from her when they're in Barbados and they're first debating it. And she says to them, she's like, you guys became CEOs. You boxed me out. You cut me out. So why am I the cunt for doing this now? And I think that's like, that perfectly summated like the double standard that she's been living through this entire series. And Rivka, I agree with you. I think it was like, I think in the moment she was making that decision, proximity to power. Like Kendall has already fucked her. Yes, Tom has fucked her over, but he is her husband. He is the father of her child. Also, upon rewatching it a second time, I watched it today to prep for this. Kendall really shoots himself in the foot when they get to Waystar for the board meeting and he sits behind the desk.
Oh yeah.
And he puts his feet up on the desk. And he starts talking to Stewie like the asshole that he is. Like, come on, man. Like, what are you doing? You're not your pancakes and waffles. Like that whole thing. And there's a couple of cutaways to Shiv watching him assume power and become the guy that he like
their father,
the worst version of Kendall. Like, yeah. Well, not.
Yeah,
even
I mean,
their
I'll grant you that Kendall really played his politics terribly with his sister. Like
with both of them.
With both of them, he really could have brought her in, and like when they were co-CEO, he just played his politics moronically, and But I just I know it's a TV show, but like you just got betrayed by an alliance between Matsson and your husband, and you're gonna go into a board meeting and give the company to those two as a reward and not to your brothers. I mean, that's That's really fucked up. Like, that is some real messed up shit right there.
I think it makes
like,
so much sense because I just think that they have fucked her over so many times that nobody here deserves her loyalty at this point. And she's been truly treated, I think, in that respect. So I don't see them as fucking her over more.
But Tom was also the one who betrayed her with Logan. Like, she's rewarding Tom.
See, I don't think she's rewarding Tom. This is what I loved. And like the dialogue when they get in the limo is brilliant too. He says, she's like, congratulations. He goes, oh, no. And that's it. And then puts his open hand out and they barely touch hands. And I just think they've decided a long time ago that like they are so whatever crumbs that they can get, they will get. And they've just like at this point, they're like, there's no love. There's nothing. I just think it tragically like that made sense to me as like the inevitable end. They're going to come back together. They're going to have a child that's fucked up, being born into this really fucked up, sad, like, can you imagine? But like, that's going to happen. She also is carrying his child, you know?
I really want to see Succession, like the movie version of Succession, where Lucas Matson comes in and just fires all of them, and just like, I mean, because I actually found Lucas Matson to be, I mean, I don't know what this says about me. I found weirdly Matson and Jared Menken to be two actually appealing characters in a bizarre, dark way. And I think this was intentional. I think Matson as sort of like, I don't care about your dynastic bullshit. Like, I mean, he's a terrible person with women and all that stuff, but like his, like, I don't take you all seriously just because you're the Roy family. Like, I appreciated that. Like, I appreciated that he sort of didn't bend the knee to this dynastic sort of thing. And I like the Roys almost never experienced people who were like, yeah, I'm not going to bend the knee, right? I mean, I guess Stewie sort of at times, and Matson. Jared Menken, this is really interesting. They do not show him being a fascist almost at all. There's all the references to assuming he's a fascist, like, oh yeah, he's the fascist, like he's the right-wing but you don't actually see him do anything or even give a speech being overtly fascist. I mean, I don't think there's somebody mentioned that maybe some brief point back in like season 3 or 2, he sort of, but you don't actually see him be, and I think this is deliberate, because I think it sort of explains to how somebody like that could rise to power, right? That like there's some sort of deliberate, like, if you ask yourself, like, why do you hate Jared Menken? Ask yourself, like, why? Why do you hate him? Like, because he's referred to as a fascist. You haven't actually seen him do anything fascist or advocate for fascism. Now, let's presume that he is a fascist. Okay, let's like presume the story's assumptions are true. It is a really good depiction of how a smart fascist, a smart, charismatic, seemingly telegenic, younger sort of non-Trumpy fascist could rise to power. And I think that like, that's actually, I had Frank Rich on our podcast, and I said to Frank Rich, I said, listen, I think one of the liberal vanities of this show, and I love this show, I don't mean it as in an insult, but it's like, if you actually had a Jared Menken, like, I don't think the election would be close. I think a Jared Menken who could actually present like that could win 400 electoral votes. Like, I think that the liberal vanity of the show is like, oh, it was a close election. I'm like, this guy who's promising to clean house, who's charismatic, who's younger, who's like that's like a terrifying depiction, because that really could win 400 votes.
Yeah. I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think there was intentional of the show to not show him being like, hey, we got to get more white people in there. But he did have the victory speech where he says, don't we want something pure and clean? So like, those are those like white supremacist dog whistles that we would hear from the sophisticated fascists. So yes. I think you're right. And I think why that appeal from both like the Matson and the Menken character, and the thing that like I think Logan was trying to say when he said you're not serious, is that Madsen and Mencken have like a savviness about them. They understand, they know how to like read the temperature. They know how to employ their charm when they need to. They know how to be scary when they need to, just like Logan did. Like, as much as we'll remember Brian Cox's performance for like, fuck off, and like being really angry, there's a number of scenes where he has to use the honeypot. You know, there's a number of scenes where he needs to coax someone and he gets really sweet and he gets really warm. And I think that level of savviness is the thing that the three kids don't have. They do at times, they do in moments, but it's not something that they have consistently. And I think like Kendall, I mean, just to get back to Kendall and the blow up in the conference room, I mean, there was maybe a chance for him to change Shiv's mind. You know, maybe Shiv was on the fence. She's like, I don't know, like this is, I think what she says is true. Like, I love you, but I cannot stomach you. And I think just like her seeing him just for a moment as the CEO, she was like, oh, that's right. This is what this is going to fucking be. Whereas she knows what she's getting with Tom in the job. And I think there was maybe a moment that they could have changed her mind, but then just he unravels. He completely loses. He starts
right. He's not still enough. He's not under control enough. He's
not under control, and he's demonstrating how unserious and how ill-equipped he is. He starts screaming at her. Him and Roman get into a full-on physical fight to try to stop her.
That was about. Like, by the way, that was about Roman like dropping some insult about his adopted kids, right? Like, was that what it was about? Like, he just like lost his shit, man.
A brutal insult. And then the moment when Shiv brings up the fact that Kendall killed someone, and then he just like flip-flops.
I think she
like
calls
4
it
times.
a murder.
But the fact that he just can't be honest with them in this moment, he's like, no, that didn't happen. I mean, it did. Like, I was there, but like I wasn't. And they're like,
by the way, we haven't talked about like. I think Tom is the character I'd like to get into a fist fight with, but Greg, can we talk about Greg for a second and how awful he is? I mean, he's just what I love about Greg's arc is like at the beginning of the show, you're like I'm into Greg, like Greg's my eyes, right? Like Greg is the audience's.
He's the audience.
You're like,
he's the avatar,
yeah. He's like the audience. You know, it's like this idiot kid who's like, you know, sort of, and he just turns into like a shell of a human, like just this, not even a shell of it, just like this horrible person who like has no loyalty to anything, and like no, like, is there one redeeming like quality of? I thought that there was a whispered line that was so funny. Oh my god, when at the funeral where Ewan is the first they tell Greg like your job is to make sure that Ewan doesn't go up to the mic.
Your grandfather.
And then Ewan like gets up. Right. Yeah. Right. And then like Greg's like he tries to stop him, and then Ewan's like, what kind of people would have the dead guy's brother not talk, right? And then when Ewan, after he like does that speech, you know, Ewan, by the way, love Ewan, like big fist bump to Ewan, like, you know, tried to keep it real. Ewan sits down and you hear Greg go, he goes, that was good. That was a real hard take. You know, it's like, like Greg has like no compass at all.
No,
like,
and it gets worse and worse and worse.
Little
it's
stage
so good.
whisper.
And he says it at the end when they're and I love that. And I love how in this show, the most important lines are sometimes like throwaway lines where Mattson's signing. They're like, okay, Jesus and his disciples. Oh, look, we even have Judas in the corner. And they're like, shoot the camera to him.
It was so good. I mean, Greg is so horrible. And by the way, what's sad about Greg being horrible is like you had hoped he might be like one person who would be less horrible. But I don't know why. Not because he's like
the
a
only
good
one who
person,
starts okay. He starts fresh. He starts with you. He starts as Ewan's kid.
Yeah, and like actually, he just ends up being like the worst. Like he just. But actually, frankly, it's almost a little bit like Tom, right? Like Tom starts out, he doesn't seem that horrible, and like, but in order to get ahead, in order to succeed in that world, you've just got to be more and more horrible. Like here's an interesting question. Did anybody advance in this show by not being horrible? Like, did anybody get ahead by not being a horrible person?
No, but there is an interesting moment with Kendall's assistant. I can't remember her name, but played by, I think, Jess. Where Jess, I mean, I love that. Where Jess was like, this is too much for fucking me. Like, after the election, and they just have that moment of like, is this really fucking happening? And just, I mean, what a great scene too, where she's tells him it's on his calendar, and he's like, what's this about? And she's like, well, I really wanted to wait till after the funeral and just tell me. And so she has to tell him, and he's just like, great fucking timing. But like, I don't know, there was one redeeming moment.
Yeah, it was all about him.
It was all about him, but I was like, there is something redeeming about her, at least by that point. I mean, like, hello, I don't know how, like, she should have known, but like, she pulls out. It's the only redeeming thing I can think. No one gets ahead. No.
Nobody gets ahead in this world. In the world that they've depicted by like making like a moral choice at all. I mean, what the guy Adam Godley who played on election night, the like political expert.
Oh, Decision Desk Darwin.
Yeah, like he like momentarily was like, wait a minute, we can't do this, and they were like, yeah, shut up, like you're gonna do this. Like he like tried to put his hand up like a little bit, and then just got like steamrolled. Like,
oh no, not even steamrolled. They're like, but what if you went on TV? And he was like, oh, I could go on TV, and like just like like it was all carrot. Well, that's it, David. That's a good. We could pivot into like talking about like our big takeaways from this finale and from the series, because I think that question like of has anyone advanced by being like a morally good character, no is the answer definitively. And I think that's I think there are like a lot of themes that this show has really hit over and over, but I think that is one of the biggest ones, which is, at least for me, my interpretation, the show is saying in order to operate in this world at this elite level with like on the corporate level that like Waystar Royco like takes up in this fictional world, you have to basically be inhuman. You have to be broken. You have to be ruthless. You have to be willing to sacrifice, to kill. You need to be willing to like basically get rid of everything about your humanity, because that is the only way to survive in this world. Not only survive, but definitely the only way to advance, and the only way to like level up is to, again, cut costs, increase revenue, roll heads, harvest eyeballs. Like that's, at the end of the day, that's what all of these characters have to do in order to swim in these waters. And I feel like Jesse Armstrong and the writing staff clearly has a lot of disdain for this corporate world, not just corporate media, but I think like, you know, the way that corporations are organized in this society. So that's something that I think the show has always been trying to say. And I think it like really nailed it in this finale.
Yeah, and the thing that's disturbing to me about the reaction to the show is that I think the elite media obsession with it doesn't acknowledge that. Not only doesn't acknowledge it, it like, I don't understand. Like, if you get what the show is saying and you are in elite corporate media and you like the show, like something doesn't make sense. Like, like you either don't get the show, like you don't get it at all, or you don't think this is a critique of what it's a critique of. Like, I don't want to speak for Jesse Armstrong and the writers, but it's like so obvious what they're grossed out by, and like the sort of obsession among, in particular, elite media types, legacy media types. It's like, it's actually disturbing that those folks like this. It's like, it's don't you get it? It's about you. Like, you're what this thing hates. Don't you get it? like it bothers me that, you know, and even today, like, you know, we're talking today on the week of the debt deal, right? Good example. The week of the debt deal that's going to crush working class people, you know. And I saw a New York Times reporter tweeting out like, oh, you know, Memorial Day is always a contentless day in the media world. Like, people are just tweeting about Succession and they're not like doing anything. And I'm like, dude, you're like at the New York Times. You could like write a story about how the debt deal crushes working class people. And then I said, like, you know, Waystar Royco, if it was a real company, would be telling its employees this week, yes, please tweet and write commentary about a prestige cable TV show, and do not cover the bill that protects billionaires and, you know, fleeces the working class, right? Like, like I guess what I'm saying is like, I the elite media response to this show, the enthusiasm for it, I think it kind of is gets to this meta level where it's like, I guess capitalism can assimilate anything, including
Absolutely.
anti-capitalism, right? Like the
Definitely.
capitalist propaganda system is so powerful that it can honor and venerate a show that is designed to criticize and make you grossed out by the capitalist system. Like it's kind of incredible.
That's such a great point.
I'm not saying I'm glad the show has gotten a great audience and good reviews in terms of its execution and everything. But I am like, it's like creeps me out that like the elite New York DC media loves this show. It's like, shit, like it's not good that you love this show.
I mean, I think one of the few things that Americans are still really good at is mental gymnastics. I think we are really we're great at finding a rationalization for the most backwards ass shit. And I think putting myself into the shoes of someone who works at like MSNBC and is watching Succession, I would imagine their view is, that's a show about what I do, except it's about a dumb family in charge. Like this isn't,
or they're like,
this
it's
isn't
about
actually
Fox.
my world.
It's not about us. And you're like, it's about all of you.
Yeah, it's not about us. Or
You're probably right.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're probably right.
And the people at Fox are like, well, Rupert Murdoch is actually really smart and his kids are good, like, or whatever their justification is.
You're probably right, and I also think it does feel incredibly. I don't think this is deliberate, but it feels especially sort of serendipitous or like special coincidence that this show came out and is now ending at a moment when Hollywood and the sort of corporate media world, that sort of blob of entertainment and corporate media, seems to be embracing the zeitgeist, sort of enthusiastically embracing the zeitgeist of a Waystar Royko. I mean, we are at a moment now where, and I said this on social media, like the owners of Waystar Royko would be the ones leading the fight to break a writer's strike, right? Like those would be like, you could imagine
1,000,000%.
Kendall being like, let's just hire the writers ourselves and like not have a union. And like, you could totally see, Roman doing that, or Logan.
On the eve of the last episode, HBO Max, everyone's logging on and they're like, oh, this is Max, and that's like not coincidental. You're like, suddenly it's Max, and okay, but I'm gonna watch the show.
Right.
It's very...
So one of my questions has been like, we say, look, there's going to be good TV. I don't think this is the end of like a good TV era necessarily, although Crushing the Writers actually, it may end up being but forgetting about for a second the quality of writing any story. Like the question I have now is, this show is ending at the very moment that corporate media and Hollywood, that blob, seems more Waystar Royko-ish than ever, which raises the question, like, can a show about this kind of topic ever be made again, or ever find a platform like this show found? And I think that's a much harder question to answer. There'll be good TV shows. I don't know how many opportunities there are to make shows about Waystar Roykos at a moment when the media entertainment world has become more enthusiastically and proudly Waystar Roykos.
It's a really good point. Rivka,
That's a great question.
What is the finale leaving you with? What is your takeaway from the end of this show and then the series as a whole?
I'm just kind of digesting and processing everything David just said, and just like that's kind of, I think, now going to be what I'm left with, just in the context of, especially when you have a show that the period of time that this was over, there were so many huge events that occurred, and there's a really great book called Elite Capture, which touches on all of this stuff about how capitalism can easily just use anti-capitalism to sell more shit. And I mean, in that lens, it's potential that there's also the potential that they're like, let's keep making shows like this, but that are like not as substantive or meaningful. I think I want to rewatch this show. I think there's probably a lot that I missed in a first watch, and I think it's one of these shows that like deserves a second watch. That's kind of where I'm left with like what being where I'm at now in 2023 than when I started. Like I think it's going to inform a lot about that journey, and I can learn a lot about where we are today. I think it's one of those great pieces of art that like will be exciting for us to reflect on and allow us to learn something about where we are and learn something about ourselves in the context of where we are. And I think that's what great art does. So it's a gift in that sense, and I'm sad to see it go.
I love that. And I just rewatched the entire series before the lead up to this final season, and it is immensely rewatchable. That is another.
Of course you did,
Well,
Frank. I'm so jealous.
I don't think I can rewatch it. I can't rewatch it. No.
Really?
No?
No, I honestly, I don't think I can because and this is not a disrespect to the writers, obviously, but like, I also think I can't think of another show. Now I haven't watched all that much TV, but I can't think of another show in which I really don't like any of the characters. Like there are shows like The Sopranos where you're like, God, Tony Soprano is a complete monster. But like I see, like sometimes you're like, I like Tony. Like he does some, like this. Like by the end, I'm like, I really actually hate you all. Like I can't stand you, and like I don't want to look at you anymore. And I think it kind of broke the mold that way. I know from having written some pilots and whatever. Like the whole thing is like, well, your main character, they got to be a little bit likable, sort of. Like I feel like these folks who made Success, they're like, yeah, nobody has to be likable at all in any way at all. Like I by the end, I'm like, I really don't like any of you except for Ewan, who stood up and told them all that they were all pieces of shit. And I was like, Ewan, I want to get go to a pub with Ewan and get drink beers with Ewan. That's what I want to do. And
James Cromwell is the real deal.
James Cromwell. James Cromwell shows up at protests, gets arrested, at anti-fracking protests, good casting call there. Love it.
Truly have bumped into him on the street while you're like, oh my God, it's James Cromwell protesting.
Oh my gosh. I would have it's funny. I would be like a fan. If I ever got to meet James Cromwell, I would be like a fanboy, like people like that who keep it real and who always, great actors who use their those people. And there's so few of them. There are so few people who are in Hollywood who use their platform to do stuff like that. Shout out to James Cromwell.
Well, Rivka and I and him share an alma mater, so maybe we could hook that up for you at some point.
Really?
Oh yeah.
He went to Carnegie Mellon?
Oh yeah.
He did. Yeah.
Incredible.
All right. Well, we have to wrap for today. David, this was such a wonderful conversation. Thank you for making time on Memorial Day to talk with us about this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I should mention, everybody, you should pitch in and become a subscriber to Waystar Royco's new newsletter. It's called... I'm kidding.
Well, David, where can our audience find you and your work if they so choose?
Yes, levernews.com. You can find the Lever there. Obviously, we are in partnership with Movies versus Capitalism. We have a whole other, also our Lever Time podcast. You can find that at levertimepod.com, and you can find our reporting. And what we try to do at the Lever is report on all the kinds of horrible people who are featured in shows like Succession, the real life horrible people. We try to be, by the way, can I make one more point about that? Did you notice? I also love this. Things that were not in this show. I have to just mention this. So the regular sort of workaday public, not in the show, right? You know what else is not in the show? It's a show about media, and journalism isn't in the show. It's not in the show. And what I love about this is making a distinction between media and journalism, right? There's media. This show is about corporate media, the media world, and journalism does not exist in this world. Now, I do think obviously journalism does exist in the media world, a very small piece now, a smaller and smaller piece of media, but there is journalism there. But the fact that they made a decision, a point of not putting journalists in this show, and I think that was a brilliant decision because because media without journalism is the garbage that we so often have. Now, that's a long way of saying the Lever tries to do the opposite. The Lever actually is journalism. So find us at levernews.com.
Awesome. David, thank you again. Rivka, thank you.
Yeah, this is great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you've been enjoying the show, please consider becoming a supporter. Again, you can find all of that info at mvcpod.com.
And a reminder, we'll be back in 2 weeks, but this is a great time to catch up on any of the movies or episodes you've missed.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.